going on? Welcome to the Secret Restaurant Podcast. Welcome to a serious rendition of the Secret Restaurant Podcast. The Serious Restaurant, Serious Radio, Secret Radio, Serious Restaurant. How is everyone doing? Pretty good, thanks. Pretty good. Not going to ask you, though, because I don't care. Hey, how's it going, man? You know, I'm glad you asked. But I gotta go, so see you later. I've been trying to immerse myself in the world of literature. I feel like I would have to make some serious life changes to truly immerse myself in literature. I.e., stop watching TV and dedicate all my time to cracking open a book, or two, or several at once. Sorry, this is making a noise. I'm gonna stop. All right. So I did start a book, which I'll tell you about. I finished a draft of my novel, and it's kind of a mess. It's actually a huge mess. Like the first, probably 50 pages, I've been writing and rewriting. It's super put together and edited and everything. And then once you get to part 3, or the tail end of part 2, that's when kind of the action starts. Serious action. Destruction, violence, chaos, betrayal. And all that stuff is kind of like, I don't want to rush it. So what I did, actually, is I printed out my manuscript. And then I put it in a Ziploc. And then I put it in the freezer. And I'm going to come back to it in a couple months. Well, I put it in the freezer as a joke, and then I took it out. We have some things coming up. September. My stomach growled. I just ate. What the fuck? Maybe it's digestion. Is that gross? Should I not talk about digestion? All right, so I have some things lined up through November of like, I'm going to have a lot of time to write stuff. And so my plan is I started something else. So I'm going to work on that through September, I guess. And then once October rolls around, I'm going to take that old manuscript out. I'm going to read through it. I'm going to add to it. And then I think it's honestly going to be ready to be rejected in the real world. To be sent out to all the places that only publish famous people. Or social media famous. Those who have more than 450 followers. All right. So, yeah, and the one, I'm starting to realize the one I'm writing, I read an excerpt of it a while ago. It's called I'm Supposed to Be No One. But it's like, I'm supposed to be someone, and then someone is crossed out, and it's like, I'm supposed to be no one. So it's like, I'm supposed to be someone. Delusions. But it's, now that I'm writing more and more of it, I'm realizing that it's about a false prophet, which is interesting because of my Catholic upbringing. It's hard to write about, like, religion. Well, I'm having kind of a hard, like, I know the character that's the false prophet, and I know him very well physically, but the hard part is, like, describing the, like, manipulation and his actual, like, prophecies and all that. Like, I kind of jumped in without planning, and now I'm realizing, like, readers will probably want this to be more a part of the story or whatever. So I'm going to have to add to that more. And then also, I feel like I had this weird thing happen this past weekend. So there was this band that I used to be a really big fan of and then kind of forgot about. Yeah, I don't know if I forgot about them, more so I saw their name and didn't listen to them. You know how that goes. If you're a fan of stuff, you're like reminded of stuff, but then you don't necessarily go back, dive in. So they're called Flyleaf. They're like a Christian metal / punk alternative band with probably, I would say, one of the best singers of that whole genre. And I forget her name. Her last name's like Stern. Lacey Stern, that's her name. And so I was going through my old CDs I used to have from high school, and I found the Flyleaf CD, which is actually crazy. It didn't have any writing on it. It must have been in like a case that had the label of it, and then I lost the case or something, but the CD had no writing on it. So I put it in the CD player, and then immediately I was like, oh, this is Flyleaf. And so then I started listening. I was reminding myself like how great a singer she was, how cool the musicians in the band were, and how much I really, really loved that band growing up. And then, weirdly enough, the next day on the Garza podcast, which I'm a fan of, she was the guest, and I had no idea she was going to be the guest. So it's not even like, it'd be one thing if I saw a reel of that band playing or something, and then the algorithm was showing me it, and then all of a sudden it's on a podcast I like that seems not as coincidental. But the fact that I found the band on a blank CD that was completely outside the internet is a little bit more strange, right? I mean, it's a crazy coincidence. So then I was going through all their albums, listening to the interview, and it was kind of like, because they are like a Christian band, although it's not like corny, really. It's not like a corny Christian band. It's like clear in the lyrics, but it's also like, there were a lot of metal bands at that time that were Christian, that kind of had success outside of Christian radio. Like August Burns Red was one. The whole thing did kind of get me thinking about the manuscript, because I listened to all 3 of the albums that she was singing on multiple times, just like in my car or like in my house or whatever, in my parents' house. And then I listened to the interview. And so then it was kind of like sneaking into my head about this character that I was writing about that was kind of this leader of a church that's a kind of a false prophet. And then I started to think about how I actually wanted to portray that and how I didn't want to be disrespectful. Because, I mean, I already been that person. I mean, I went to Catholic school through senior year of high school. And I already been that person that's like, people who believe in God are stupid. Like, I've already been that person just because in my environment. I think when you're kind of forced to believe something, you automatically resist it. So I was probably an asshole back then. But I haven't felt that way a long time, but I don't really have a specific belief of things coming true. I definitely don't have the spirituality at the level that like the band has, or the band was talking about in the interview or stuff. But it did give me a kind of a perspective, like how do you handle this character I'm writing about that's like started this false church and is like a false prophet? Because it can't just be like straight satire. I mean, it could be, but I don't think that would make it like a very good book. So I kind of got the whole manuscript together, and I was going to think about it or whatever. The one that I've been working on for maybe a month, and I'm going to try and, it'll be a shorter book. It's not as complicated. But now that I think it's its own thing. But I will say, I'm not going to say what it's about just yet, but I will say after watching that Obsession movie, like kind of some of the cleverness of that movie kind of snuck in to this manuscript. Not really in like plot points or anything, but I can kind of see maybe I wouldn't have written the same book if I hadn't just watched that movie this year. So we'll see how it turns out. Maybe it won't even be a novel. Maybe it'll just be a short story or something, but novella. Let's talk about some books. I will say this has just been preface after preface before talking about this very important book that I have read 70 pages of. Eventually, I'm going to talk about that Dennis Johnson biography. I don't know why I put it off so long, but I will say the second half that I haven't talked about yet, there is so much stuff I did not know. So it'll be fun to drop some conversational points about that book. Today we will be discussing author who I talked about one time. His name is Larry Niven, and he co-wrote a bunch of books with this other writer named Jerry Pournelle, Pournelle. So I was familiar with Larry Niven just because he's one of those old school sci-fi writers that people who like sci-fi are aware of. Kind of a deeper cut than like the more famous authors, but still he had a pretty successful writing career and is still alive. He's kind of controversial. There's like a subsect of science fiction. Surprisingly, a lot of people maybe don't know this, but there's a pretty huge category of science fiction, specifically in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that is actually ultra right wing, borderline libertarian, and he is one of those authors. He actually got involved in politics, and he said a bunch of dumb shit and had a bunch of dumb ideas. But that has not stopped me from reading him. So I'll shout out, just because I'm not super knowledgeable about the deep cuts of sci-fi. I haven't read a whole lot of them. But you don't come here to listen to a genius. You go elsewhere for geniusness. But I do like the YouTube channel Book Pilled. I've been going through some of those videos recently, which kind of inspired me to pick up this one, which I had on my shelf for forever. And that dude knows a lot more about science fiction than anybody ever, probably. But this book is Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. It's called Oath of Fealty. I'm going to read the back for you. Okay, so where crime, violence, pollution, and poverty still rule the streets, a utopia rises. Todos Santos, a 1,000-foot-high single-structure city, the perfect blend of technology and humanism, offering its privileged dwellers everything they could want in exchange for their oath of allegiance and their constant surveillance. But there are those who would see utopia destroyed, those who would tear down the hope of tomorrow in violent act after violent act, and they have just entered Todos Santos. So yeah, it's like, it actually takes place in future Los Angeles, where outside, like, there's like environmental crisis and collapse of society outside, and so they build this huge skyscraper, it seems like, 1,000-foot high single structured city, and people can move into this place, but then it's like they're constantly surveilled. And so it starts like with some guy starting a job as one of the surveillors. They're just like watching cameras. They have to like stop people from doing this and that. I think that was kind of crazy. So like I said, this Larry Niven, he's like a right-wing writer, sometimes extremely right-wing. A lot of the stuff, so the one book I read by him, I didn't really care for it, but I didn't pick up on the politics of it really. It was more just like an alien story. And then this one, obviously, the if it's going to be about societies, new societies, collapses of societies, there's going to be politics involved. I don't know if I've entirely picked up on the right-wing agenda in it. It's more just like what if, and like kind of posing. Maybe if he thinks this is the solution, making this sort of gated community at like an extreme scale, no pun intended, of like this basically massive skyscraper that people aren't allowed in. And if you are allowed in, you basically have to be on camera 24/7, that's what the story is. He's promoting these sorts of ideas, then that's sort of I would say more of a right-wing ideology, but I wasn't really reading it as him promoting it. It's more like a what if. But maybe that's just because that's how I would like to read into it as. There was one interesting thing that almost felt like a liberal or communist or anti-capitalism statement, although he didn't voice either way whether it was good or bad. Basically, at the base of this towering society, there's a mall, and anybody can go to the mall. People can come from outside who aren't involved in the living structure, the apartments and everything above it. They can still go into the mall and buy stuff, which a lot of people do. And then one of the characters offhandedly says, well, people come in here and spend their money, but then all their money stays in this society. It doesn't go back out to their society, which is an interesting thing. It almost seems like it's not capitalistic in that way. It seems like it's saying that's a bad thing. It's like, now it made me think about like people were against Walmart taking away from communities, local businesses, and now it's like Amazon, all the money's going to Amazon. Like those are kind of the height of capitalism, and how people choose to spend their money on corporations when like the money doesn't go back to their own communities, basically. Maybe the problem was that there was no criticism of it, or maybe his heroes make it a good thing that sort of practice happens, which it happens all the time in the real world. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like whenever I try to talk about these things, there's people who are smarter than me who can talk about it or whatever. But it's been an interesting read. I've liked it a lot more than the first one I read. And the actual writing of it is basically like simple as hell. It's like really easy to read. Sometimes you just gotta pick up a book that you don't really need to squint your eyes at. Short sentences, 75% dialogue, those sorts of things. I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to say them both now so that I don't forget. So I'm going to talk about the politics of it, and then I'm going to talk about the idea of a book being mostly dialogue. Okay, so I just remembered a lot of the reasons that people dislike Larry Niven and a lot of his controversies actually do come from the idea that, I can't remember which president, but one president actually worked with him. He was on some governmental position where he was actually hired to think about solutions to problems in society. And so there's one that he said, you can even find it on his Wikipedia, but I'm not going to say it, but he did kind of have a mentality of like, he was like pretty much, he was racist, and he also like had no problem alienating people economically and things like that. And so I guess this would be an example of alienating people economically, is building this structure. And so if you do read this book as like him proposing a solution to a potential economic collapse, societal collapse, then in that way it is kind of problematic. But if you just read it as a story that's like ambiguous towards its own politics, then it's more just like a traditional sci-fi, I would say. All right, and then in regards to the dialogue, it is like whole pages of dialogue, and that kind of style is pretty common in pulp science fiction, pulp novels, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I don't enjoy reading them, honestly. Like, even when it comes down to describing what's happening within this skyscraper, it's usually one dude telling another person, like, the details of it, as opposed to explaining it in, like, paragraph form, or even in, like, sensory detail form, which I think would be a lot more interesting. I'm not sure why pulp writers choose to write in so much dialogue as opposed to description, except maybe it's because it's easier to read, and maybe it's easier to write. But for me, it's kind of one of the reasons I don't actually read that much pulp. If I open up a book at a paperback stand in a used bookstore, and it's like the whole page is dialogue, I already kind of know that I'm not going to like it as much as books that have more action, description, and those types of sensory detail stuff. Also co-wrote, which is another interesting thing. I mean, I can't really tell the difference between this book and the one that I read that was only written by Larry Niven. So I'm not sure what their process was, or maybe they just, this Jerry guy imitated his style, or maybe he gave him an outline, or Larry Niven gave him an outline reversely. They wrote a lot of books together. I don't know how many, but more than a handful. And they wrote like about whole universes. That's another cool thing that makes sci-fi appealing to me, is when you see a writer has different series that are based in this whole universe. Like they'll have 3, 4, 5 books in one universe, and then they'll have like 2 or 3, 4 universes, all with their own series. That's pretty badass to me. It also makes it confusing to keep track of everything, or to know where to start. Because for me then, I would just want to read like one book per series. See which one is the best. See which one is the worst. See which one I'm going to talk about on here with you. All right. I think that's all I got. I'll talk to you guys later. I'll talk to you guys as soon as I can. Don't worry. Don't worry. Goodbye.